going nowhere. I got you for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of playtime.
This game. This weirdo game with cartoon characters shooting guns, getting drunk, stealing cars, and overthrowing their oppressive government forever changed the way I looked at video games.
Peeps be getting deep sixed.
I've replayed the entire Jak trilogy a stupid amount of times, but the middle installment holds a very special place in my heart. Jak 2 is the game that got me into games like Grand Theft Auto and just more mature games overall. For the developer Naughty Dog, it was like those awkward, angsty teen years, transitioning from making kid-friendly games to more mature, gritty, story-driven ones. And this game got way darker.
Were you talking about the tone?
No, it was very hard to see.
Now, making your franchise's tone darker isn't always the best idea, but I think Jak 2 is a great example of when that kind of pivot works in its favor. The first game, Jak and Daxter, was essentially Naughty Dog's take on the collectathon platformers that dominated the market. To this day, it's still one of the best. It's great for a lot of reasons, but mainly because Jak feels so good to control. I would even say Jak and Daxter is objectively the best game in the trilogy. But for the sequel, Naughty Dog decided to take a hard turn towards the changing landscape of video games at that time. Our once silent, plucky protagonist was now a tortured soul, a swearing, angry edgelord out for revenge.
Something's happening to me.
In some regions, the game was even given the subtitle Renegade.
Renegade, that's my nickname. Renegade, Renegade, come in. What's up, Tower? This is Renegade. Hit the turbo jets. Bam, bam.
Look at Jak's new facial hair. You can't tell me this game isn't hard as fuck. The tone shift wasn't the only thing different. The gameplay focus shifted from collecting to mission-based linear storytelling. Jak and Daxter had a pretty forgettable story and characters. But in Jak 2, the story plays a huge role in the game. It gave the game more of an identity and more meaning behind the objectives. I never played a game where you had to navigate and track missions via a minimap, or had to steal vehicles to get around, or had to deal with hostile authorities at the same time. This is about all it takes from GTA, since the hub world and pedestrians don't offer much other than that. What makes it fun are these hover cars. You have this mechanic where you can switch between higher and lower hover zones as you navigate the very memorable Haven City. This is what keeps me coming back to Jak 2, riding these hover cars, and the combat. Jak still moves and plays like he did in the first one, only now, he has guns. I've seen Jak 2 being called a third-person shooter, but I just don't agree. Maybe it's just me, but when I think of the term shooter, I think of something you can actually aim with a reticle as part of the shooting gameplay. But I think the guns were a clever way to diversify the platformer combat, which was already pretty solid. And quite effectively too. Each of the 4 gun mods have an appropriate function. The depth behind this seemingly basic weapon system is ultimately what puts it above its predecessor for me. Both the vehicle and the combat systems feel rewarding to pull off successfully. I should mention you can also turn into Dark Jak. I don't recommend using it though, like ever. Feels like a tacked on feature to sell its darker theme, and it's not useful or fun compared to all your other combat options. You also couldn't be hardcore and edgy in the early 2000s without including some skateboarding, so of course they managed to throw that in there with the inclusion of the hoverboard. But it's not just for novelty. The hoverboard feels really smooth to ride, offering another option for movement. And the few missions where using the hoverboard is required leaves me wanting more.
I'm gonna jet on my sick new hoverboard.
Jak 2 isn't the easiest game. Don't let the cartoony aesthetic throw you. This game can make you rage even if you know what you're doing. The racing segments in particular can be frustratingly tricky. The game makes you work for the win, and so it feels good when you do, even if you had to deal with some bullshit along the way.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Most of the game is running, jumping, shooting, and driving hover cars. All of that is great, but some of the missions where you're not doing those things are just not that fun. And Jak 2 has a decent amount of missions that I think can be taken out entirely. All of the turret and loader mech missions have aged like shit. Not only do you have to aim with the left analog stick, but the margin for error is pretty large, and the loader mech feels clunky, not fun to control, really slows down the game's action. Luckily, there are very few types of these missions. All of the Jak games have one set difficulty, no easy, normal, or hard modes. Some of that difficulty can no doubt be really demoralizing. Getting knocked back to the beginning of a really long level over and over is something you have to be willing to do here. The checkpoint system can be especially unforgiving, and you'll have to just learn mission parameters through trial and error. I have no doubt there are certain missions that would turn a lot of people off entirely.
Okay, sorry.
There hasn't been another game like Jak 2 since it was released in 2003, and that makes it one of a kind to me. I haven't seen a single game use these hover zone mechanics that I love navigating Haven City with. If Crash Bandicoot platforming in a cartoony GTA-style setting sounds appealing to you on any level, I can't recommend Jak 2 enough. The HD remasters are available on PS4, but if you have the opportunity to play the originals on PS2, I'd opt for that route. The HD remasters are running the game on some sort of PS2 emulator, and it just doesn't feel the same. The frame rate stutters and dips way more often, and I even experienced some finicky input lags and audio clipping. Still serviceable and fun if you've never played the games. Naughty Dog has been silent on the Jak franchise since they walked away from it. This was concept art for Jak 4 before they decided to scrap it and work on The Last of Us. Okay. I've always had this lofty wish of Naughty Dog remaking the trilogy into one reimagined masterpiece, mostly taking notes from all that was great in Jak 2. Don't make this though, what the fuck is this?